Look, I didn't do anything wrong. Just told the truth. We were talking about experience, and I said mine was proof I knew what I was doing. He went quiet, really quiet. The next day, a lawyer's letter arrived. Apparently, my experience was the end of us. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. It started as a game over dinner. 6 of us around the table, wine glasses half empty, laughter bouncing off the restaurant walls. Someone joked about relationships and experience, and I, feeling clever, said my body count meant I was educated in real life. Everyone laughed, everyone except Thomas. He froze, fork mid-air, his face pale but composed. I thought he was embarrassed for me, not by me. I leaned in, teasing him lightly, saying he wouldn't understand because he'd only ever been with me. That got another laugh from the table, even from Lucas, my brother, though he looked uncomfortable doing it. I said, "It's not a big deal, it's just numbers." And he said nothing at all. He just folded his napkin neatly and kept eating. I remember thinking he was being dramatic, like always. After dinner in the car, he asked quietly if I realized what I'd done. I told him not to start another lecture, that I was just being honest. He said, "Honest doesn't mean cruel." I said, "You're just upset, because you can't handle the truth." He didn't respond. When we got home, he went straight upstairs, didn't even turn on the light. I posted a picture from the restaurant that night, captioned it, "Real women don't hide their pasts." Within an hour, people commented with fire emojis and words like bold and queen. I smiled at my screen, thinking that would show him I wasn't ashamed. By morning, he was gone to work early, as usual. But his side of the bed was perfectly made, the pillow undisturbed. I checked my phone, no text, no call. I told myself he was just sulking. He'd cool off, he always did. Later, Lucas called. He sounded uneasy. "You might have gone too far last night," he said. I laughed it off. "He's fine. He just doesn't like when people laugh at his expense." Lucas paused. "It wasn't funny to him, Celine. You made it sound like you were comparing him to everyone else." I said, "That's his insecurity, not my problem." That afternoon, I got a call from Clara, his mother. Her voice was low and sharp. "I heard what you said about my son." I said, "It was a joke." She said, "It was humiliation." I told her she was overreacting too. She said, "Maybe, but he's not." I brushed it off again. Thomas was sensitive, and his mother was worse. I told myself I wasn't going to shrink to make them comfortable. I'd always been proud of being blunt. It's what people liked about me at work, at parties. I didn't see why marriage should be an exception. When Thomas came home that evening, he didn't look angry. He looked hollow. I tried to make small talk, asked if he'd seen my post. He said, yes. I waited for the rest, but he just said, "So that's who you want to be?" I said, "Someone honest, yes." He nodded once, like he'd been expecting that answer. We ate dinner in silence. Sophie was upstairs, playing with her dolls. I remember thinking he'd get over it once we went to bed, like always. But when I went upstairs, he was already in the guest room. The next morning, I found an envelope on the kitchen counter, thick and cream-colored, with his handwriting on the front, for Celine. I smiled at first, thinking it was one of his peace offerings, maybe an apology letter. I tore it open and froze. Inside was a single-page letter on legal letterhead. Notice of intent to file for separation. I called him immediately, but he didn't answer. I sent a dozen texts. Are you serious? You're actually going through with this? Over one conversation? Nothing. I tried to laugh it off when I got to work, telling my coworkers we were having a communication gap. But even as I said it, my voice sounded false. During lunch, Tara, my friend from HR, pulled me aside. She said, "I know it's none of my business, but maybe you should delete that post. People are talking." I asked who, and she looked uncomfortable. Someone shared a clip from dinner. You can hear you saying it. My chest went tight. Who would record that? I asked. She said, Does it matter? It's out there. That night, I waited for him to come home. He didn't. I called his office. They said he'd taken the day off. Around midnight, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, All further communication can go through legal counsel. I threw the phone across the room. He couldn't be serious. We'd fought before. Worse than this. Once, I'd told him he was emotionally dull. Another time, I'd said he was lucky I settled. He'd always stayed, always forgave. But something was different now. Around 2 a.m., I checked the restaurant tag again. The clip was gone, but people had already commented. Vague posts about women embarrassing their husbands in public. My stomach turned. The next morning, my mother called. She said, What's going on, Selene? Your aunt just asked me if your marriage is over. I said, People love drama. She said, You created it. By then I was furious. I told her everyone was making a mountain out of nothing, that Thomas needed to grow up. She said, You've confused honesty with cruelty. I hung up on her. When I finally saw him again 3 days later, it wasn't at home. It was outside Sophie's school. He handed her backpack to me without looking at me. I said, We need to talk. He said, We already did. You just weren't listening. He turned and walked away before I could answer. That night, I sat alone on the couch, the separation notice still on the table beside me. For the first time, I didn't know whether to tear it up or frame it, because deep down, I wasn't sure which of us had just won. The next few days blurred together. Everyone kept asking questions I didn't want to answer. My mother, Lucas, even co-workers pretending to care. I told everyone the same thing. Thomas was overreacting, being dramatic, trying to make me look bad. Saying it out loud made me feel strong again, even if deep down I wasn't sure I believed it. At work, I threw myself into projects. I smiled through meetings, laughed too loudly in the break room, and told anyone who asked that marriage just wasn't for everyone. But the whispers started anyway. I could feel them when I walked into the kitchen for coffee, the quiet pauses after my name. One morning, Tara came to my desk and said gently, People saw that video again, Selene. It's making rounds in the group chat. I asked, What video? She looked uneasy. The one from the restaurant. Someone reposted it. It's blurry, but you can tell it's you. I felt my face flush. So what? I said what I said. I'm not going to pretend to be ashamed. She sighed. Maybe you should just stay off social media for a while. That night, I deleted the post, but not because I regretted it. I told myself it was just to control the narrative. Then, out of stubbornness, I made a new one. If honesty ruined something, maybe it needed to break. It got dozens of likes in an hour, mostly from acquaintances who like drama. I sat there scrolling, feeling both powerful and hollow. Thomas still hadn't come home. Sophie kept asking where he was. I said, Daddy's staying somewhere to think. She said, Did you do something wrong? I froze. No, I said too quickly. Adults just argue sometimes. She nodded, unconvinced. 2 days later, a messenger arrived with another envelope. I opened it on the kitchen counter, expecting more legal threats. It was worse. Inside was a letter from his lawyer requesting a temporary separation of residence and documentation of financial accounts. I threw the papers down, laughing bitterly. He wants to make this official, I muttered to myself. Fine, let him play his little game. That evening, I called Lucas. He didn't pick up. When I texted him, he replied hours later. Selene, you need to stop making this worse. I wrote back, I didn't do anything. He answered, You humiliated him. People saw it. Own it. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Darren. He'd been a client I met during a marketing pitch 2 years ago. Confident, smooth, the type of man who always knew how to flatter without sounding like it. We'd exchanged harmless texts before, nothing serious. But now, I just wanted someone to tell me I wasn't the problem. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, stranger," he said lightly. I told him things had been messy at home. He said, "Your husband never deserved you anyway." I smiled, even though I knew it was exactly the kind of line he said to everyone. We talked for almost an hour. He made me laugh, and for a while I forgot how heavy the house felt. When I hung up, I felt better, calmer even. I told myself it was harmless. The next morning, Thomas sent a short text. "I'll be picking Sophie up Friday afternoon. Have her ready." I replied, "You don't just schedule your child like a meeting." No answer. That night, my mother called again. Her voice was tired. "Celine, you're making things public that shouldn't be. You're not helping yourself." I said, "I'm not going to hide. He's the one acting like a child." She said quietly, "He's not the one being talked about." That stung more than I wanted to admit. When Friday came, Thomas arrived right on time. He looked calm, almost polite. Sophie ran to him, all smiles. I tried to start a conversation, something, anything, but he kept it short. I said, "We can still fix this, you know." He said, "You can't fix something you keep breaking to prove a point." I rolled my eyes. "So this is about pride." He looked at me for the first time in days. "It's about respect." He left with Sophie before I could respond. That night, I sat with a glass of wine, scrolling through my phone again. Darren had sent a message. "Thinking about you." I typed back, "You always know how to say the right thing." It was late when I saw a new comment on my post. Some people never learn when to stop talking. I clicked the profile. It was one of Thomas's co-workers. I deleted the post, this time without thinking twice. The following Monday, Clara showed up unannounced. She stood in the doorway, her coat still on. "I don't want to fight," she said. "Then don't start," I said. She sighed. "Celine, you've made this into a spectacle. Thomas doesn't even have to defend himself. You're doing it for him." I said, "I told one joke, Clara." "One." She shook her head. "You told the world your husband wasn't enough. That's not a joke." When she left, I felt like the house had shrunk around me. The silence was louder than her voice had been. Later that night, I texted Thomas again. "Are you really doing this?" This time, he replied, "You said your past showed experience. I guess I'm learning from mine now." I stared at the message for a long time before turning off my phone. For the first time since that dinner, I started to feel something I hadn't felt before. Not anger, not even guilt. Just fear that maybe this time he wouldn't come back at all. The following week, I told myself I needed a distraction. Work wasn't helping, and the silence at home was unbearable. Every room reminded me of Thomas. The smell of his coffee, the dent in the couch cushion where he always sat. I started staying late at the office, pretending to be productive when really, I was just scrolling through my phone, waiting for someone to message me. Darren did. He sent a photo of the city skyline with the caption, "Would be better with company." I replied before thinking, maybe it would. He invited me for a drink that Friday. I told myself it was innocent, that I deserved to feel normal for one night. I even texted Lucas to tell him I was finally getting out again. He wrote back, "You might want to lay low instead." I ignored it. We met at a bar near his office. He greeted me with that same charming ease I'd always liked about him. "You look like someone who's been thinking too much," he said. I laughed and told him he wasn't wrong. We talked for hours, about work, life, how people love to judge what they don't understand. Every time I complained about Thomas, Darren nodded like I was completely justified. When I left, he said, "You don't owe anyone an apology for being honest." The words sank in deep, like they'd been waiting for me to hear them. That night, I posted a picture of my drink with the caption, "Some lessons are learned late." I thought it was vague enough, but within minutes, someone commented, "Your husband seeing this?" I deleted the post. By the next morning, I'd convinced myself I hadn't done anything wrong. But by afternoon, Tara texted me, Celine, there's another photo going around. My stomach dropped. Of what? I asked. You and that guy from your old campaign at the bar. Someone saw you. I called her immediately, my voice sharp. It's not what it looks like, she said softly. Then why does it keep looking like this? By evening, my phone was buzzing with messages. People from work, old friends, even my cousin. Most said nothing directly, just vague things like, hope you're okay. It was worse than insults. It meant they'd already judged me. I didn't sleep that night. I sent Thomas a long message. You're making people think I cheated. This is your fault for leaving and not defending me. He replied hours later, You did that yourself. I'm not your shield anymore. The next day, HR called me in. My manager was polite but firm. This publicity isn't good for the company, he said. I argued, My personal life has nothing to do with work. He said, Unfortunately, perception does. I left the office shaking. I drove aimlessly for an hour before stopping at a cafe. Darren texted again. Rough day. I told him what happened. He said, You're strong. Don't let small-minded people break you. We met there later that evening. He put his hand on mine, said I didn't deserve any of this. For a moment, I believed him. It felt good to be seen again, to have someone choose my side without conditions. But the moment didn't last. The next morning, he didn't reply to my messages. By afternoon, his social media accounts had no trace of our chats. He'd vanished. Lucas came by that night. He looked tired, wary. You need to stop Selena, he said. Thomas is collecting everything. Screenshots, posts, witnesses. You're handing him the case. I snapped. So now you're taking his side too? He said, I'm trying to keep you from destroying yourself. After he left, I sat on the couch staring at the empty spot where Thomas's laptop used to be. It hit me then that maybe this wasn't just about pride. He was preparing something, methodical, deliberate. Later, my mother called. He came by to talk about custody, she said carefully. He wants Sophie to stay with him for a while. I felt my stomach twist. He can't take her from me. She said, He's not taking her, he's protecting her. When we hung up, I paced the living room for an hour, replaying every word I'd said over the past month. I tried to remember when I'd lost control of the story. It used to be so easy to twist things, to sound like the one with reason. Now, no one seemed to believe me, not even myself. That night, I scrolled through old photos of Thomas and me. We looked happy, not perfect but connected. He'd always been steady, predictable, the calm to my noise. I used to hate that about him. Now I realized it was the only thing that ever grounded me. Then my phone buzzed again, an email this time from his lawyer. The subject line read, Formal petition for custody and division of assets. I didn't even open it at first. I just stared at the subject line, the black letters blurring together. When I finally did, the words were cold, professional, final. Attached were screenshots, time-stamped photos, and a brief note. Please refrain from further public commentary about the marriage pending legal proceedings. I slammed the laptop shut and sat back, shaking. For the first time, I understood how quiet revenge could be, how devastating calmness could sound when you'd built your power on noise. I poured myself another drink, staring into the glass. Somewhere in the distance, I heard Sophie's laughter from an old video playing on my phone. It felt like another life. I whispered to no one. He's really doing it. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt small. The court papers changed everything. Once they were real, once they had stamps and signatures, people stopped seeing me as dramatic and started seeing me as guilty. My parents spoke carefully, as if every word might set me off. My co-workers avoided me completely. Even the house felt heavier, like every room was waiting for me to admit something I didn't believe I'd done. I tried to call Thomas that week just to talk, but he didn't answer. Instead, His lawyer replied the next morning with a single sentence. All communication should remain formal until resolution. That was when I realized he'd stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a problem to be solved. The first custody meeting was scheduled for Friday. I wore a dark dress, simple makeup, something I thought looked responsible. I wanted them to see I wasn't some reckless woman who deserved this. When I walked into the mediation office, Thomas was already there, sitting beside his lawyer. He stood when I entered but didn't say a word. He looked calm. That same quiet calm that used to frustrate me, now weaponized against me. The mediator asked questions about schedules and finances. I tried to answer confidently, but my voice kept shaking. When Thomas spoke, he sounded steady, prepared. He even used phrases like emotional stability for the child. It sounded rehearsed, but it worked. When I tried to defend myself, I stumbled. I said, "He's punishing me for being open." The mediator tilted her head. "Could you clarify what you mean by open?" I felt my throat tighten. I don't hide who I am." Thomas's lawyer slid a stack of printed screenshots across the table. Photos from my posts, the bar picture with Darren, the caption about learning late. I felt my stomach drop. "Those were taken out of context," I said. She nodded politely, like she'd heard that excuse before. After the session, I followed Thomas into the hallway. "You're really doing this?" I asked. He said, "You already did." I said, "You're turning Sophie into a weapon." He looked at me, tired but firm. "No, I'm keeping her out of your performance." The words hit like a slap. That night, I went home and sat on the couch until the sun came up. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even think clearly. I kept replaying the scene at the restaurant, the laughter, my voice saying those words like they were funny. By the weekend, my mother showed up at my door. She didn't even say hello, just looked around the house, sighed and said, "You need help, Celine." I said, "Help with what?" She said, "With accepting that you can't control every story." I laughed, sharp and loud. "I'm not the one rewriting the truth." She said softly, "No, you're just erasing people from it." When she left, I sat by the window scrolling through my phone. Darren hadn't replied to my last message in days. I typed another one. "Hope you're okay," but deleted it before sending. I couldn't bear another silence. Monday, HR called me again. This time they didn't ask. They told me to take a leave of absence. "For your well-being," they said, but I could hear what they meant. "You're a liability." I packed my things slowly, pretending I didn't care. On my way out, Tara hugged me. "He's not going to stop, you know," she whispered. I said, "Neither will I." But we both knew that wasn't true. That evening, Lucas came by. He hadn't visited since the separation started. He brought takeout and didn't talk for the first half hour. Finally, he said, "Thomas is a good man. He's doing what you would have done if the roles were reversed." I glared at him. "So now you think he's the victim?" Lucas shrugged. "I think he stopped being your target." I told him to leave. He hesitated at the door and said, "You keep calling this honesty, but honesty without kindness is just ego." I slammed the door behind him, but the word stuck. Later that night, I opened my email. Another message from Thomas's lawyer, this one formalizing his request for temporary custody. My chest tightened as I read the line, "Child to reside primarily with father until final judgment." I called Clara out of desperation. She answered on the first ring, her voice calm, as if she'd been expecting it. "You can't take her from me," I said. "She's my daughter too." She sighed. "She's his daughter first right now. He's the one protecting her." I shouted, "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" She said, "You think everything is about enjoyment. Sometimes it's just consequence." Then she hung up. For the rest of the night, I paced the living room, holding the phone like it might ring again. But it didn't. Nothing did. The next day, a courier arrived with a sealed document, Thomas's formal motion for custody. The signature at the bottom was his, neat and calm, the same handwriting that once left notes on my desk saying, "Missed you today." I stared at it for a long time, tracing the loops of his name. For the first time, I wondered if he'd planned this all along. Not the revenge, but the quiet, the patience, the slow, deliberate way he'd built a life that could continue without me. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, studying my reflection. I looked older, harder, like someone I didn't quite recognize. I whispered, "You wanted to win." The reflection didn't answer. It didn't have to. The day of the custody hearing came grey and cold, the kind of morning that felt like a warning. I dressed carefully, navy suit, hair pinned back, no bright colors. I told myself appearances mattered, that I could still control this. When I walked into the courthouse, the sound of my heels echoed too loud in the hall. Thomas was already there, of course. He stood beside his lawyer, calm as ever, holding a folder thick with papers that probably had my name printed across every page. He glanced at me once and nodded politely, as if we were business associates, not two people who had shared a home, a child, a life. I tried to hold his gaze, but he looked away first, which should have felt like a win. Instead, it made me feel invisible. Inside the courtroom, everything smelled of paper and old coffee. The judge introduced herself in that professional, detached tone people use when they want to sound kind but stay above you. I sat beside my lawyer, palms sweating, pretending I understood what any of it meant. The proceeding started with Thomas's lawyer summarizing our history. She used that word, history, as though everything we'd ever shared had already been filed away in the past. She described me as emotionally volatile, publicly disparaging, and socially reckless. Every phrase landed like a bruise. My lawyer objected a few times, but it didn't matter. They had proof, screenshots, timestamps, comments. My words, stripped of tone or context, were now evidence. I wanted to stand up and say, "That wasn't what I meant." But even I didn't believe that anymore. When Thomas spoke, his voice was steady, almost too calm. "This isn't about revenge," he said. "It's about environment. I want my daughter in a home without constant conflict." I leaned forward. "You're acting like I'm dangerous." He looked at me then, not angry, not smug, just tired. "No, I'm saying I'm done living inside your performance." The judge raised her hand for silence. "Mrs. Armitage, please let your counsel speak for you." I sat back, shaking. Every time Thomas opened his mouth, he sounded more reasonable. Every time I spoke, I sounded desperate. The imbalance was unbearable. When my lawyer finally called me to respond, I tried to smile. "I love my daughter," I began, but my voice cracked. "Everything I've done was misinterpreted. I'm just honest. Maybe too honest." Thomas's lawyer didn't even flinch. She held up a printout of one of my posts, the one where I'd written, "If honesty ruined something, maybe it needed to break." She asked, "Would you say this reflects your general approach to communication?" I hesitated, searching for something clever. "It means I don't lie." She smiled slightly. "Even when the truth hurts others?" I froze. The silence stretched. The judge nodded slowly, like she'd heard enough. By the time we broke for recess, I could already feel how this was going to end. In the hallway, I followed Thomas. "You don't have to do this," I said. "We can fix it." He turned to me, eyes calm but cold. "You want to fix your image, not us." I said, "You're punishing me because I embarrassed you." He shook his head. "You embarrassed yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He started to walk away. I grabbed his arm. "You're taking my daughter away from me." He looked down at my hand until I let go. "I'm giving her peace." Then he walked off. When I returned to the courtroom, Clara was there, sitting quietly behind Thomas. She gave me a small nod, not of sympathy but of finality. The message was clear: this is over. The second half of the hearing was mostly procedural. Numbers, dates, plans. I barely listened. My mind kept replaying the sound of Sophie's laughter, her small hands clutching mine at bedtime. The thought of her not being there every night made my chest ache. The judge called for closing statements. My lawyer spoke about second chances, emotional recovery, a mother's bond. It all sounded rehearsed. Then Thomas's lawyer stood, her tone even, almost gentle. Mr. Armitage has acted with restraint. He seeks not punishment but stability. His silence has already said more than anger ever could. I wanted to scream. Instead, I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. When the judge gave her summary ruling, she didn't look at me. Temporary custody will remain with the father pending full review. Both parties are advised to minimize contact outside of legal channels. The gavel hit the wood with a dull crack that felt like a door closing. Afterward, Thomas walked past me without stopping. No final glance, no words, just the quiet certainty of someone who'd already won. I stayed behind in the empty courtroom until the clerk asked me to leave. Outside, the air felt too bright, almost cruelly normal. I sat on the courthouse steps, clutching the file my lawyer had handed me. Inside was a copy of everything. Every quote, every post, every mistake I'd made thinking I was being brave. When I finally went home, the house felt foreign. Sophie's toys were gone, her shoes, her school bag, gone. I wandered from room to room, touching things that no longer belonged to the life I'd built. Around midnight, I poured a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. For a split second, I hoped it was Thomas. It wasn't. It was a court notification confirming custody arrangements and upcoming asset reviews. I put the phone face down and stared at the glass. I thought about how much energy I'd spent trying to look powerful, how hard I'd worked to prove I wasn't the weak one. And yet, in the end, it was his quiet that broke me. He'd never yelled, never fought dirty. He'd simply waited for me to hand him every piece of evidence he needed. Now, all he had to do was walk away. When I finally turned off the light, the house sank into silence. The same silence I'd once mocked him for. The same silence that now belonged entirely to him. The official decree arrived 2 weeks later. A thin white envelope tucked into my mailbox like an afterthought. I stood there in my robe, the morning light spilling across the floor, staring at my name typed beside the word respondent. It sounded sterile, like I was just part of a file instead of someone's life. I didn't open it right away. I made coffee, sat at the table, and stared at the envelope as the mug went cold. The silence in the house felt heavy, unfamiliar. I thought about all the times I'd told Thomas that silence was his weakness. Now it was his victory. When I finally tore it open, the words blurred together. Custody granted to petitioner. Assets divided. Court concludes with final judgment. There was no ceremony, no signature in blue ink, just black type on white paper. The end of everything, summarized in legal language. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, already knowing. "It's final, isn't it?" she said softly. I didn't reply. "Celine, you have to stop chasing this," she said. "You've lost too much already." I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time, I had nothing left to defend. That afternoon, I drove to the small apartment I'd rented near the edge of town. 2 rooms, beige walls, a view of the parking lot. The furniture still smelled like plastic wrap. I unpacked slowly, folding clothes into drawers, stacking plates, pretending order could replace meaning. On the counter sat a photo of Sophie, her gap-toothed grin frozen in time. I'd brought it from the house before Thomas changed the locks. At dusk, I sent him a message. I'd like to see her this weekend. "Please." He replied a few hours later, formal and brief. "Contact the family liaison for scheduling." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back, "You don't have to be so cold." He didn't answer. The next morning, I woke to another email, this one from the liaison confirming a supervised visit. I wanted to scream, supervised, like I was some kind of danger. When Saturday came, I put on my nicest dress, brushed my hair 3 times, and drove to the appointed centre. Sophie ran to me as soon as she saw me, her small arms wrapping around my waist. For a few minutes, everything else disappeared. She showed me drawings she'd made, one of our family, still together, holding hands under a blue sky. "Daddy helped me," she said proudly. My throat tightened. "It's beautiful," I whispered. Thomas waited quietly by the door. He nodded politely when our eyes met. I tried to talk to him, to say something normal, but the word stuck. When the visit ended, Sophie clung to me. "Can I stay with you tonight?" she asked. I forced a smile. "Next time, baby." When I handed her back, Thomas thanked the staff, calm and courteous. He didn't look at me again. I sat in the car afterward, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The parking lot shimmered in the heat, but I couldn't bring myself to start the engine. I just sat there until the light began to fade. That night, I walked around the apartment like a ghost. The walls felt too clean, too empty. I opened a bottle of wine and scrolled through old messages, old photos. There we were on our wedding day, me laughing, him looking at me like I was the only person in the room. I wondered when exactly that look had faded. I searched for his name in my contacts again, just to see it. My thumb hovered over the call button for a long time before I finally typed, "Can we talk? Just one last time." The message stayed on, delivered all night. The next day, I woke to an automated reply. "This number no longer accepts personal messages. Please contact legal counsel for inquiries." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He'd blocked me, not in anger, but in finality. I threw the phone across the room, then immediately regretted it when I heard the screen crack. I sat on the floor, shaking, surrounded by the pieces of my own noise. A week later, Lucas came by unannounced. He looked uneasy, holding a bag of groceries. "You're not eating, are you?" he said. I shrugged. "I'm fine." He glanced around the apartment. "This place feels sad." "I didn't ask for your opinion," I said. He sat anyway. "I talked to Thomas," he said carefully. I froze. "Why?" He said, "Because I wanted to know if he'd ever forgive you." I laughed bitterly. "And what did the saint say?" "He said forgiveness doesn't mean returning." I stared at him. "You think he's right?" Lucas sighed. "I think you spent so long trying to win every argument that you forgot people aren't trophies." When he left, I sat there replaying that line over and over. Later that evening, I checked Sophie's school page online. There was a new photo from her class trip, her smile bright, her hand holding Thomas's. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere in the caption. It felt like erasure, but maybe that was the point. I spent the next few days trying to distract myself with routines, workouts, cleaning, anything that filled the silence. But at night, it always crept back. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he was doing, if he ever thought about me. One evening, as the sun set through the blinds, I pulled out the old journal where I used to write campaign notes. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "I thought honesty was strength. Maybe it was just noise." I sat there staring at the words until the ink bled slightly into the paper. A soft knock came at the door. When I opened it, there was no one, just an envelope lying on the floor. My name written neatly on the front, his handwriting. Inside was a single photo, Sophie holding a certificate from school, smiling proudly. On the back, 2 words in his small, careful script, "She's okay." That was it. No letter, no message, just proof that life had gone on without me. I sank onto the floor, holding the photo against my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad, just quiet. Because now I understood what Thomas had meant all along. That peace wasn't silence from others. It was silence within yourself. I whispered to the empty room, "You won, didn't you?" But there was no bitterness left in the words, only truth. And for once, I let the silence answer me back. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.